No, I do not think 250,000 poor white Southerners died to protect rich people's ability to own slaves. I fucking know they did. You really thought this was a gotcha argument, didn't you? Like, I'm genuinely curious, where do you think the next step in this argument goes for you to have any sort of relevant point? Are you trying to make the assertion that poor people would never fight and die to protect the interests of the wealthy against their own personal interests? Because if that's your assertion, I just would like to point your attention to literally every war in the history of ever. Every single war in the history of civilization has been fought by poor people protecting the interests of people wealthier and better off than them. Do you really think poor kids went to Vietnam because they were worried about the plight of the South Vietnamese? You think kids went to Iraq because Saddam Hussein was a threat to their life in Podunk, Kentucky? You think that every redcoat whose boots on the ground for British imperialism was awash in slaves and spices? Who do you think fights wars and who do you think benefits from wars? Because they are not the same fucking people. Furthermore, unlike Vietnam and the Second World War and the War on Terror and all of these other wars that we can go into, where the US was attacked, or we had propaganda at least about being attacked, and many of them had drafts on top of that, Southerners didn't have any of that for the Civil War. There was absolutely no propaganda pretending like the war was about anything else but slavery. Every single state article of secession cites slavery as the main or only reason to secede. The headline issue in the Confederate Constitution was slavery. The cornerstone speech from the Confederate Vice President about what the Confederacy was about was exclusively about slavery. And after every single one of these fucking states made very clear that they were seceding over slavery and pretty much nothing else, they fired the first shots of the war at a federal Union fort. They couldn't even use being attacked first as their calling to arms. Every single Confederate soldier was a racist traitor who knew exactly what they were fighting for. And they volunteered to do it. The reason that a bunch of poor, white, racist, piece of shit, traitorous Southerners would go fight and possibly die to preserve slavery is the same reason that those same pieces of shit voted for the next century to keep segregation alive. It's the same reason that they vote today to oppress people of color, to oppress the LGBTQ community, and it's because they are the shittiest people in society. They are the bottom of the societal barrel. They are generally poor, uneducated, unaccomplished people who are looked down on and oppressed by the people who are of a higher class than they are. But these are things they don't want to admit about themselves and their place in life. And who would? They're on the bottom, and nobody likes being on the bottom. Nobody likes being the whipping boy. But instead of fighting the people who are oppressing them and keeping them down to advance their place in life, they punch down to oppress somebody else even more than they themselves are oppressed. Their life hasn't gotten any better, but at least they can look down and feel like they're better than somebody else. Well, it might just be poor white trash, but at least they're white. So when you look down on those minorities being oppressed more than you're being oppressed, you can feel good about yourself because that whiteness means you got something in common with the people who are oppressing you that you actually have nothing in common with the exception of you both now being horrible people. So yes, 250,000 Southerners died to protect rich people's ability to own slaves. Because rich people's ability to own slaves solely based on the fact that they looked slightly different than you meant that they could feel better about their own shitty, miserable existence.